Whether you operate one forklift or thousands, one location or hundreds, the new My Toyota customer portal can help you optimize your operation and material handling equipment. This one-stop, free-to-use platform is designed to help you take control of your information and make smarter decisions, all at the touch of a button. Register and access your data today at my.toyotaforklift.com. That's my.toyotaforklift.com. Hello, and thank you for being a listener. Before we get into the episode, I wanted to let you know about a special offer being given to the new warehouse listener. That's you. Mobile Robot Guide is offering 10% off just for you when you purchase the Warehouse Solutions Buyer's Guide. Just use promo code WarehousePod10 at mobilerobotguide.com. That's WarehousePod10. This is your comprehensive guide for all things autonomous mobile robots. That's WarehousePod10. And for more info, go to thenewwarehouse.com.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. Today I'm going to be joined by a previous guest, Dave Baiocchi. He is the president at Resonant Dealer Services. You may remember the last time we spoke to Dave was on episode 84. We were discussing business in a post-COVID world, and we are not there yet. We are not post-COVID yet. Hopefully soon in the new year, I would hope for. But today we're going to actually talk about one potential change or a change that's already taking place due to COVID, I believe, in the world of material handling dealers. And we're going to dive a little more into the December 2020 cover story written by Dave, titled Factory Stores Coming to the U.S., and you can find more on that story at mhwmag.com. But now we're going to talk to Dave and hear a little bit about what he has to say on the topic. So, Dave, welcome to the show. How have you been?
I've been good. Thank you. It's good to be here again.
Yes. Good to be talking to you again. Very, I guess, interesting. The last time we spoke, we talked about business in a post-COVID world, and as I just mentioned a minute ago, we're not really there yet, right?
No. We got a ways to go.
Definitely. So talk to us a little bit about, I guess as a refresher, you work kind of with dealers on the material handling side, and help them to kind of get their business either back on track or more. Add more services, and that's one thing that we talked about in the previous episode. But for this month's article, you wrote about factory stores. So I'm curious. This is something I will be honest and say I'm not totally familiar with personally. So I'm curious. Let's get into, I guess, some of the basics first, and then we'll talk about how the environment's changing a little bit. So what's the difference when we talk about a factory store versus an independent dealer?
Yeah, well, for the past 40 years or so, the model that the material handling, equipment industry in general followed was that they had strong OEMs who built quality products, and they routed those to independent dealers who represented those products and sold those products to the marketplace. Okay. And for about 40 or 50 years, that's the way it's been, and we really haven't had the OEMs playing in the distributor space. They've stayed in the manufacturing space, and each one did their part to get equipment out to the marketplace. And now we see a change coming, and some of this is from COVID, but a lot of it is just the natural evolution of our industry. And for reasons that I lay out in the article, you've got OEMs that are more and more motivated to get involved in the distributor space and take things from the factory direct to the end user. And I think, when you ask what's the difference, between independent dealers and factory stores, in the early going here, the most obvious answer is that, the OEM has a lack of experience in meeting all of the end users' needs.
Right.
The OEM business model is constructed around funneling two tangible items to the dealer, and that's new forklift trucks and replacement parts.
Right.
But they don't have rental fleets, and they don't deal with used equipment, and they don't market service. I think it's completely reasonable to assume that they have the background and ability to establish brand value and compete for equipment sales in the marketplace. But I think the deficiencies tend to appear in the rental and service profit centers, where the OEM really has little prior experience and lacks the retail background to manage and balance their internal policies with customer expectations. They don't understand what the customer really wants out of a service department, and they struggle with that. And also processes like forecasting, management reporting, accounting, expense allocations, those are all based on the only model they have, which is a manufacturing business model. And because of the complexities there, that frustrates the retail operation. Because distributors tend to have to be a little more nimble and a little more customer-centric and a little more flexible and a little more innovative in order to gain an advantage and get the order. So there are some guys that are doing it well. The level of success that an OEM will have depends on multiple factors. You got guys like Lindy and Young Heinrich, who started long ago in the European marketplace as direct sales entities. That's how they started their business. So they have a different model altogether.
Right.
And they tend to struggle less with understanding the complexities of dealer operations. And then you have some guys from North American OEMs like Crown and Raymond, and they've heavily invested in factory store operations over the past 2 decades. And in my opinion, for those two OEM players, their market focus includes a lot of integrated systems, 3PL, national accounts. And because of that, it almost made necessary for them to really participate in the retail point of sale in some way, shape, or form. So some guys are doing it well, and other guys are struggling, especially where they don't have any experience dealing with that. I think that the OEMs that are focusing on the broader market, specifically ITA Class 1, 4, and 5, they tend to have a much harder time acclimating. And these, are all really manufacturers who never originally expected to have to address the retail market head on.
Interesting. Yeah. So it is interesting. And you mentioned Raymond in there. I'm familiar with Raymond from personal experience. And, we've also talked to them on the show as well. You mentioned all the different services that they offer. So there's a little more, I guess, expansion and involvement with the customer there. So you mentioned there, a lot of the OEMs, as they're trying to move into this different type of model, in a sense, that they're not necessarily understanding the customer needs, or, they've never really been prepared to kind of meet those customer needs and from a service perspective. So how do you think either that will affect the relationship the customer has, or I guess maybe the perception of the brand? Do you think that will impact that?
Well, you talk about the perception of the brand.
Right.
That is what the OEM is trying to preserve.
Right.
Which is why in a lot of cases. Now, in some cases, they decided to get into this business lock, stock, and barrel. But a lot of these OEMs are tiptoeing into the distribution business because they have an installed base, and they want to preserve that installed base. So they go about trying to care for that installed base by themselves, but they're ill-equipped to do it in many cases. And they're going to have to figure out what the end user really wants, because they've been focused on what the dealer needs in order to get the equipment out. They've been focused on manufacturing only. And this is, it's a brand new field that they're working in. And it's going to be rough going for them to really meet customers' needs.
Yeah, definitely. So I think it's interesting seeing the shift, and I definitely agree that when you talk about, I mean, in any industry, you have these manufacturing companies that now they weren't really customer facing previously, and now they're trying to get in. It changes things a little bit. So, but you mentioned that it isn't necessarily COVID or the pandemic that's really pushing this model. You think it's the evolution over time. So what do you think has happened in the industry? I mean, you've been in the industry for 37 years now. What do you think you've seen over the last couple years, or what different types of things has kind of driven this evolution to this?
We'll be back after a quick break.
You hear a lot about supply chains these days, because if the past couple years have taught us anything, it's that an efficient, well-managed supply chain is absolutely critical to keeping businesses successful and consumers happy. I'm Will Haywood, and I host a podcast called All Business, No Boundaries, where we talk about supply chains, how they work, what happens when they don't, and the innovations that are redefining what's possible in the world of logistics. Join me for insightful interviews with thought leaders and industry experts. We discuss how optimizing supply chains can break down the barriers that are holding businesses back. That's All Business, No Boundaries by DHL Supply Chain. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Well, with or without the pandemic, the distributors in our market are in a state of evolution. With the notable exception of Crown and Raymond that we talked about, most of the OEMs are still depending on independent dealers for retail distribution. They do tend to want and look to evolve to having. They used to have a lot of smaller dealers. Now they want fewer, larger dealers. And that has been since the 1980s. They've been trying to, it's easier to write policy and to draw programming for a smaller group of dealers that are all headed the same direction than when you have small guys in small territories and regional, all the regional complexities. It's harder to do that. So that is one of the ways it's going. They wanted dealers to buy each other. Okay. Adjoining dealers to sell to each other, and that's happened in many cases. But I think whether it's pandemic or whether it's evolution, we are in the middle of a market disruption, and market disruptions serve as a stress test for dealers. When we have a disruption like this, if they're not sufficiently capitalized, they're going to look to divest. The length and the severity of the disruption only accelerates, and exacerbates that condition. So if you have a long-standing privately held dealership that they don't have a solid succession plan in place, and they're looking for an exit ramp, right, because they have this market disruption, they really only have 5 options. They can sell to an adjoining dealer. They can sell to their employees through an ESOP or through a privately leveraged situation. They can sell to private equity. They can sell to a competitor, or they can sell to the OEM. Now who's going to be open to make an offer? That's not all 5 are going to be available, but one of those 5 is going to be the ramp to get the existing ownership out and get somebody else in. So as the market evolves this way, from many small dealers to fewer larger dealers, I think OEMs are rethinking their level of involvement in the retail space to protect their installed base. If you have a large dealer that sells to private equity or their competitor or even their employees, the OEM risks losing significant market share and part sales if that venture fails. Right. If you know anything about private equity firms, generally they're not interested in long-term investment or growth. Yeah. They want to wring the money out of the operation and sell it in 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, what's the exit strategy?
That runs antithetical to all of the agenda of the OEM. So in order to control their position in the marketplace, the OEM enters the arena, right? But it puts him in a tenuous position from the very beginning. Perhaps that dealer wasn't well capitalized enough to begin with. And now the OEM is entering a market that he wouldn't choose to be in if it weren't for the need to do a salvage operation just to preserve his market share. All right. So let's talk about how that kind of pans into the future, right?
Yeah.
And well, because what I'm seeing is once OEMs are in the distribution business, that one of two things happens, right? They either want to get out right away, right? Find somebody else. They're a placeholder, right? They're going to find somebody else to hand this to, or they'll continue to acquire dealerships and create. And what they'll need to do, and the ones that are being successful with it, are create separate retail management groups that have people that have significant dealership experience and expertise to operate them. And the second option is what we're seeing by and large in the marketplace. And you look at Toyota, right? 7 dealerships acquired since 2007. Most notably, Atlas Companies, one of their largest dealers. They took an ownership stake there, and they continue to expand that. In October just last month, they acquired Toyota Lift in Minnesota. So they continue to reach out and do this. But Toyota tends to set it up with its own accounting, with its own marketing, with its it really is a separate entity. It is not an adjunct of the manufacturing, which I think is where they're going to be most successful. And we also see it with Mitsubishi Logisnext. Your MCFA, Unicarriers, Caterpillar, Mitsubishi, they continue to purchase dealerships. There's been 6 dealerships acquired since 2006. In 2019, they purchased Pawn Material Handling, which runs Equipment Depot, which is right through the center of the country, multiple state, multiple branch. And then Equipment Depot subsequently then acquired dealers in Boston and Milwaukee, which were previous Unicarriers dealers. So they are stepping forward and stepping into this and wanting to be successful with it instead of just being a placeholder for somebody else.
Right. Interesting. So it sounds like the market is kind of this, I guess, model is forcing some consolidation of markets, right? Yeah. So,
and the consolidation was going to happen anyway. I mean, look, it's already happening with the OEMs. Right. You've had, if you looked back over the past 20 years, you've got Toyota and BT, you've got and Raymond, you've got Unicarriers, MCFA, they're together, Hyster, Yale, they needed economy of scale.
Right.
And so they acquired each other in order to get that. Now they're looking to retain market share, retail market share. And the only way for them to truly protect it is to actually control it.
Yeah, take control.
And not be subject to the whim of a independent dealer that decides he's going to sell to private equity.
Interesting. Yeah, it's interesting to hear this side of it, as usually I'm, a customer, right, instead of on the dealer side. So is I'm curious now, we talk a little bit about the dealers and, the different models versus each and what it's shifting to. As we look at the current atmosphere and, also kind of, I guess, talking about, our previous discussion about the post-COVID world, and obviously COVID it's still here. So, what are dealers, I guess, kind of seeing right now? I think we had talked previously about, what does business look like and how do they kind of expand their offerings? Like, what are they seeing now a couple months later as we're catching up? What are they seeing in terms of sales and services? Is there an increased demand? Because, we're seeing increase in demand on the supply chain itself. So are dealers?
It depends on the products that they're selling. Yeah. It depends on the region that they're in. It depends on what market segment that they're appealing to. Certainly, warehousing and 3PL direct. Right. Direct buying over the internet, that has become the wave of the future. That's the thing. if you're involved in that sector of the business, you have the right products and the right offerings, you're going to be doing really well. If you're even manufacturing, manufacturing has moved all their finished goods to 3PL.
Right.
And so you're still going to be busy, but there are sectors of the marketplace that are really down and will continue to be down, and the equipment's just not going to get used, which puts pressure on the parts and service end of your business. You can only you can only repair stuff that somebody says is broken. You can't magically make that appear. People actually utilize the equipment in order for your services to be needed. So that continues to be a worry. But the stress test isn't over, Kevin. It continues, and if you're not well capitalized, you may be in the crosshairs of having to make a decision that you don't necessarily want to make or weren't prepared to make.
Definitely. So it's interesting, to hear from that side. I was curious, where do these things stand? So now on the other side of things, we talked about, the impact, I guess, on the dealers, and then we talked about the impact on the manufacturer itself, moving these models around. But, a lot of the listeners are customers as well of the dealer. So, so how is the shift to a factory store, how will that have an impact, maybe in the short term and also like in the long term, in the future? How will that impact the customer themselves?
I got to be, full disclosure. I mean, I come from a dealer environment, and I was a dealer principal for the best part of a couple of decades, and so I still believe that right now, as far as who's going to serve the customer best, the independent dealer is better suited and more capable still, and to meet the needs of the user, because this is his mandate. Distribution is the dealer's only business. He's been focused on it for a long time. It allows him to be intuitive. It allows him to be flexible. Not that these guys that are the OEMs won't organize themselves and respond to some of the early failures that they've had in dealing with customer demands, because over time, with the right leadership and autonomy, the OEMs entering that distribution space may be able to replicate that same customer experience. And like I said earlier, some are doing a fine job now. Time will tell. But this is an unavoidable market reality. And will customers suffer? I think that they were used to a certain service, and their needs are growing. The one thing that I always say about the evolution of our industry when I'm talking to brand new people in our business, I do an onboarding session where I talk to them about the industry and with the direction the industry is taking. Customers used to just buy equipment. Now they don't want to do that anymore. They just want to buy equipment. This is not a simple sale. They want us to leverage data. They want us to tell them how the solution we're going to prepare for them is going to pay for itself. Right. That is really what customers want. Are OEMs ready to enter that conversation on their own with the market background that they have? The answer is no, unless they've been doing it for a while, or unless they've already got an integrated solution that like these guys at the that focus on class 2 and 3 have had for a while. But by and large, the rest of us that are class 1, 4, and 5 focusers, well, they're going to struggle.
Interesting. Yeah. It's interesting to hear, how the market is kind of shifting, and then ultimately, the ones that kind of will drive the market is the customer a little bit, right? So, it's interesting to see how that'll have an impact. And I touched on it before, saying like, I wonder what the brand perception will be. So it'll be interesting, even though the OEM, in a sense, like you mentioned, is trying to preserve the brand in a way. If there's some shortfalls, like you're mentioning, about, not necessarily providing the same service level that an independent dealer will have, it'd be interesting if that'll kind of have a little impact on the perception in a negative way. So it'll be really interesting to see how how this stuff changes, and this is kind of a new thing for me to talk about. So I'm really interested to talk to you about it, and it's been a good learning for me as well about how the different models work, and I think a lot of the listeners too would be interested to hear this too. So thank you for talking to us again on the show, obviously, for the new warehouse.
Very good. I appreciate the opportunity.
Material Handling Wholesaler. So how can people get in touch with you again with Resonant Dealer Services?
Yeah, they can go to my website, which is resonantdealer.com, RESONANT, resonantdealer.com. Or they can call me directly at 209-652-7511. And whether you're a customer or whether you're a dealer or whether you're a manufacturer, I'd be happy to share some notes with you and let you know what I'm doing and what I'm thinking.
Awesome. And we'll put all the information at thenewwarehouse.com as well. And definitely a reminder, too, that you can read the article for December 2020 at mhwmag.com. So, Dave, thanks again for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you want more content from the New Warehouse, check out our new video series called All Hands on LinkedIn. Just search for the New Warehouse on LinkedIn and follow along.